Right,
Kim?
hello, everybody. Yes, hi. Lovely to thank you for inviting me along.
Yep.
I
So,
don't know
um,
if you want me just to talk a bit about my 2023 voyage, or if you've just like to run it as a Q&A. You might have some questions which can prompt discussion. How would you like to proceed, Kim?
well, let's start with some questions, and then
Yeah.
if it leads to the discussion, we can go and follow your latest voyage. Obviously, first of all, welcome to Raid Sydney again. So I think you were here about 3 years ago, after your epic adventures with the unlikely adventures of Jack the Crow. Um, so of course, I had lots of questions for you back then. And then you went and did it again. So obviously we'll
Yes.
get you back again
Yes.
to finish the job. And if you do it a third time, we'll ask you back again when the time comes.
Yeah, it's looking unlikely at this stage. I must say, I got to Venice, hopped off the boat, and said, I am never getting on a boat again. Nothing. Not even, not a Sydney Harbour ferry. Nothing. That, that'll probably reverse in time.
Okay. All right. So I'll start with the first question. So I actually asked this question last time as well when you had your previous
Yeah.
visit here. Um, so the first adventure, you were completely sort of offline and no phone, no internet. Um,
Yeah.
it sounded like you were just journaling and being sort of in your own place. This time it felt like the entire internet, all the Facebook followers were tracking you day by day. Um, what was what was the difference for you? Was it a better experience, a worse
Yeah.
experience?
Oh no, look, really, really good question. And it was a very significant decision for me. I was thinking when I started, I was genuinely thinking, let's see if I can do this without a phone at all, without any type of social media or without any electronic modern day communication. And I almost thought that would be a bigger selling point than actually doing, you know, people would go, oh yeah, he sailed from Sulina round to Venice, big deal, but he did it without a phone. Oh my God, that would be the sensation, which is ironic, isn't it? Because of course, 20 years ago we did everything without phones, and God knows how we did it. And I was very conscious, like I think most of us are in the modern day, that we spend far too much time on our phones. We scroll and we get pulled into all the stuff. And I was thinking, it would be actually really fantastic to go and do it without a phone. And I'm always comparing things to literary episodes because I just see myself as a bit of a hero in a storybook or anti-hero or something. And I was thinking of that in Lord of the Rings, where Bilbo, right at the beginning, he's trying to give up the ring, and Gandalf saying, "Leave it, leave it, leave it," And he goes, Yes, all right, I've left it there on the mantelpiece," but he hasn't. And Gandalf finally is the one who pretty well bullies him into saying, "Leave it and go off and have your adventures." And he finally does, and of course, it's good that he does because he escapes from that power. And I was thinking that chapter almost writes itself. And then, of course, when it came to it, I didn't do that. So that's all a bit of a dead end. But uh, when I thought of the practicalities, I thought, I mean, if you go anywhere now and you just want to book into a hotel or do anything, you need a phone nowadays, don't you? I mean, it's tedious, but you do. Um, so anyway, long story short, I did decide to um, keep the phone. And as it turned out, I have a very, very lovely and very, very clever godson, Jem, who's actually living in Sydney at the moment, working for Opera Australia. And he looks after me, very, very nicely. Um, and he said, Sandy, let me set you up a Facebook page. And I, what's Facebook? I don't really know what this is. And he did. And in fact, he was responsible for setting up that Facebook thing that everybody got on, the unlikely voyage, another unlikely voyage of Jack de Crow. And as it turned out, it was superb. It was really, really, really lovely. you should have most nights sitting down, looking to see, checking messages and finding incredible messages of support from literally all over the world. America, Australia, England, Greece, and all points in between. And I I really, really that was the thing that encouraged me to keep a constant. I don't know what it's called, a journal, but it's not called a journal, is it, when you're writing it on a phone? And that really inspired me to keep taking photos, keep writing things up as I went. And so it actually worked really well. And it also had some practical consequences, like people could get hold of me and go, You're just about to sail into Missolonghi. Well, we're in Missolonghi on a yacht. You please come and have dinner, or stay the night. So I met people along the way through that lovely network that social media provided. It turned out to be really good, though it doesn't really make it into the book. I've written the new book, and I'm downplaying it, which is dishonest, but you know, who wants to read a book about somebody checking in on their phone all the time?
So did you feel as though people were there with you in the adventure, or was it sort of like would have been the same experience if they were there or not?
Uh, I didn't really so much feel that they were there with me, but I definitely felt that type of cheering on from a distance. And there were times when I really, really was close to giving up and just saying, oh, stuff this. And then I think, well, there are about 1,000 people out there going, well done, Sandy, carry on. You can do it. We're rooting for you. Send us photos of Venice. And I go, oh, right, okay, well, I have to. So they were, in that sense, a sort of a motivator. Not always in the moment welcome motivation, but in the long run, I'm very glad they were part of what kept me going all the way through.
All right, thank you. All
So
right,
yeah, it was good.
so who's got the next question?
I'll just add on to that. There was one bit where it began to go a little sour, and uh, I actually put this in the book, but it's edited out, and that's fine. But there was one bit where um, I'd had a few dodgy experiences in Albania. As everybody, everywhere you go, you meet over officious bureaucrats and people who were, not particularly helpful or cooperative. And of course, in my writing them up, I was exaggerating them. I was turning them into a bit of a story. I was turning them into a caricature. I was making them out to be, monsters, and me, the poor, bemused traveller. And that's all just part of the writing. But then suddenly there's somebody in England, I can't remember who, somebody suddenly was writing and going, oh, yeah, bloody Albanians. Oh, yeah, I mean, we've got them coming over here and taking our jobs and raping and pillaging and bringing drugs. I wouldn't trust the Albanians, And and then somebody else jumped on that and said, "You have no idea about what it's like to be a refugee." And suddenly the whole forum
Hmm.
was turning into this awful thing, which the internet's known for, this sort of sudden fight where people were flinging in as complete strangers and giving their opinions on every side increasingly rapidly. And I had to stop and write a very rather schoolmasterly lecture, little reprimand saying, guys, this is not what it's about. And please don't start jumping on what's me meant to be a bit of a comic caricature and suddenly using that as a way of stirring up trouble. So please don't. And one of them just disappeared, and two or three sheepishly said, "Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir." And I didn't have any more trouble, but it was interesting. But that was, even on the high seas, you can't quite escape that tendency for things to turn into a vortex of grudges and grievances. Anyway, sorry, that's all.
Next question, anybody?
Sandy, I've read
Yes.
your books, but I can't remember you describing what your sailing experience was back in Adelaide in your young years. Can you just tell us a bit about, what your early experiences were with sailing?
Yeah, yes, Phil. Anybody would think from reading my books that I must have been an absolute mad, keen, obsessive sailor, and I wasn't. My main sailing, we had we'll still have a holiday house right on Lake Jindabyne in the Snowy Mountains. I don't know if you know Jindabyne. Very, very fortunate to have a house quite, right on the lake there. And my mother, she had a little mirror dinghy called Firefly, and she would take my older brother and my two older sisters and myself out sailing on the lake. And and it was always a bit of an adventure. It was always swallows and Amazons. Mum had grown up on those swallows and Amazons books. In fact, her father was a very close friend of Arthur Ransom. Arthur Ransom was almost a godfather figure to Mum, and so I'd always go along as the youngest ship's boy, sort of playing the part of Roger in the Swallows and Amazons books. And I didn't actually enjoy it too much because it was boring and I never got to steer. And I was always just put right up the front on that little foredeck because when I was small. Um, and I had the ignominy of, if I needed to do a wee, I'd have to wee in the baler in front of everybody. and, and I hated it, but it was sort of forced on us. And then the silly thing was that as soon as the weather got rough, and the winds came up as they do on Lake Jindabyne, suddenly winds coming from everywhere, and we were really battling. Mum says, you would just suddenly come alive and you go from this bored, whining kid to standing and singing and laughing and finding it huge fun. And but my brother and sisters went on to really enjoy racing. My brother especially racing dinghies. I That was the only sailing experience I had, and it was that was about it. Really, just pottering around. And then, of course, once I did my journey from New Zealand to England without flying any of the way, and I got experience crewing on yachts, but that's pretty different, as you know, from dinghy sailing. Um, and so, in fact, Phil, it's a constant tension between myself and my lovely older brother, but he's very much an older brother figure, who yeah keeps looking. If I ever sent a photo of me sailing along, he'd be the first on the messaging going, Sandy, you didn't have the I don't even know the technical terms. You didn't have the gunter hauled in tight enough, and your boom vang was sloppy, and you would have been getting a lot more mileage if you didn't have the something. I go, "Oh, I don't know." Um, so I'm the least expert in my family, but I'm the one who, you know, set off and did these silly adventures and didn't learn an awful lot along the way. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that was great. I didn't realise you'd. I know Jindabyne Lake, and yeah, it's cold and not somewhere you want to capsize. Even in summer, it's cold, I think.
It is, and Mum, bless her, she's still alive in a local nursing home, and she always she didn't think a sail was worth doing unless there was a capsize involved.
Yeah,
And I think something I do take after her is that, capsizes we'd capsize, and before she'd even surfaced, she'd be turning it into a good story, sort of spluttering to the surface, laughing, and then beginning to try and tell the story while she was still, disappearing under the waves again.
yeah.
And I think I might have inherited that tendency.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
yeah, but also, of course, Jindabyne has all those little islands on it, and that made it again. To me, I was never interested in racing, never interested in what my brother was interested in, getting the most out of the sail. To me, it was, oh, can we skim between that island and that island without bumping? Or can we um, slip into that little cove and explore that creek? It was all about the exploration and the
mm,
storybook nature of it, not the technicalities of getting the most out of a sail.
mm, mm.
Right, Chris, you're next.
Hi. I was just wondering about the how you went finding spots to stop each night. A lot of the coastline, just from looking at Google Earth, looks fairly inhospitable. And what
Yes.
challenges did that present?
Chris, is it? Yes. So
Yes.
look, certain bits are very, very inhospitable, especially from Romania, Sulina down to Istanbul.
Yeah.
Ports and harbours, villages are few and far between, especially in the first few days. Um, I I was persuaded. Well, I was persuaded by somebody back in England before I was setting off to get an, a tablet, and this was loaded with a thing called Navionics, which probably you all know about, and it shows every single port, harbour, shoal, you know, reef, whirlpool, everything. And I took one look at it, opened it up, and just thought, oh, can't be bothered with this. So it sat in the bottom of my boat. And this old Romanian fisherman said, "I'll just get a thing called Maps Me," and it's a very, very basic maps navigation thing. And I downloaded that on my phone somehow. But I reckon, and I'm slightly exaggerating here for comic effect, I reckon it must have a setting on it called adventure setting, old-fashioned adventure setting that I must have inadvertently pressed because whenever I'd open it up, I'd see things like the the Tower of Garganides or the cave of the sea tritons or the ancient towers of Ilium, Troy. They would all be there, and major ports like Constanza or Navadopoulos or Navopolis wouldn't appear at all. And, I'd sort of think, surely, I'd be sailing past this vast industrial city, wouldn't be anywhere on my maps me, but it would show that inland there was a well sacred to the Druids. So anyway, somehow I ended up doing a lot of it by sight. I'd sort of realized, it looks like a little inlet, and I reckon I can get there. And in the end, I mostly found little villages, and later on, harbour towns. But there were a number of times when I'd just land on a beach. I had a little tent. I'd set that up and sleep the night. Once I was down into Greece, it was and the Aegean, it was much, much easier. I mean, you were going past beautiful little harbour towns the whole way, and every single one of them had tavernas right on the seaside and a little guest house just up the hill. And so that part of it actually became quite easy and not as adventurous as I felt it should have been, really.
What sort of distances were you doing each day? What sort of time were you spending out on the water?
The very first day of proper sailing on the sea, I went 67 kilometers, and I thought, oh, God, this is good. I'll be in Venice in about 3 weeks with this, and I never did that again. That was a fluke. I had just the most perfect wind I was reaching right the way down the coast on quite a strong wind, but relatively steady seas. So yeah, 67 kilometers was my record. Um, Mostly, I mean, 30 kilometers was a good average. And occasionally I would go further than that, 40 or 50. And then some days, the problem is once summer set that part of the world, you always get this afternoon wind called the Meltemi or the Mistral. It's depending on where you are. And that made sailing just almost impossible. So from about 2 o'clock onwards, the wind would get stronger and stronger and stronger. And by 4 o'clock, I'd be desperate to get into harbour, find a place out of the waves and the wind. And so often that would actually, mean I'd only have done 20 kilometres a day because it just wasn't safe to keep going. And it regular as clockwork, it could be beautiful, beautiful sailing all morning up till about 2 o'clock. And then by 4 o'clock, it was almost unmanageable in the mirror.
Okay, next question. So I'll go next then. So, did I don't know whether you've been to the area before, but did you get any new insights on the Odyssey from sailing in those waters and sort of seeing the modern places?
Yes, I'm not sure I had new insights, but I've always, as you know, Kim, I've always been absolutely in love with the story of the Odyssey. I wonder if any of you have read Tim Severin's book. Any of you know about Tim Severin? It,
No?
it fascinating, worth commenting on. So
Okay.
Tim Severin was an Irishman who, in the 1970s, he did a series of remarkable voyages that are worth getting the books on. Um, and he worked out that if you're going to try and work out, like so many scholars have gone, okay, so the Odyssey, if it were true, where might he have met the Cyclops? Which island did he get to describe, which place was the land of the Lotus Eaters? Which place, is Scylla and Charybdis between the whirlpool and the monster? And they've speculated, and none of them very successfully. Tim Severin had this stroke of genius. He thought, right, if you really want to find out, what you do is you build a boat precisely like Odysseus would have sailed. In other words, a Bronze Age galley from about, so can't remember the dates, 1000 BC. And he did that, and he manned it with 13 oarsmen, strong oarsmen, and he set off from Troy, the ruins of Troy, at spring, because apparently that's when the records say it was spring. And at that point, he just realized that, if you're sitting here on this particular beach, and that beach I've now sat on, and it's spring, well, the winds are coming from that direction, and probably have for the last 3,000 years. And the only landmark in sight is probably that cape. So let's head for there. And when you get to that cape, the only thing you can really see is an island across there. So let's head for there, and so on. And he set off sailing this boat, and he found remarkably that wherever he ended up on this rather zigzag route, following landmarks and the prevailing winds, he kept coming across things that fitted perfectly into the legends, into the myths. So, I mean, the very best example, which I love, is there's a bit where Odysseus comes across the island of Aeolus, who's the god of the winds. And he lives in a bronze tower. It's described as a bronze tower. And he is a genial fellow, and he gives Odysseus a bag out of which he can pluck any wind he wants, a north, south, east, west wind. Well, just off the tip of Crete, there's an island that's very, very sort of tall and like a sea stack. It's bronze-coloured rock. It's very ready gold rock. And at that point, Tim Severin found, in all of his voyaging, there was that one point where in 24 hours, you get every single wind. If you want a south wind, you just wait. After that, wait another 6 hours, you'll have an east wind. Then you'll have a west wind. Then you'll have a north wind. And so this is the perfect example of a legend sort of having its basis in truth, and only discoverable by Tim Severin, who's doing it the hard way, like Odysseus. So anyway, look, to answer your question, with that in mind, I was also thinking all the while that same sort of thing. When I was coming out from Troy, you pop out into the Aegean, out of the Dardanelles, and you're really left with a choice. Well, look, that way looks incredibly blank and featureless and stormy. This way looks gentler, and there's a coast I can follow. Let's go that way. And so all the while I was beginning to think, well, if I were Odysseus in a small boat, I probably would have come this way. And I get to this bit, this huge, great gulf that goes round, but I can see the hills across it. I reckon I can get there. And in fact, I found some places way off any route that Odysseus would have done, where there was a tiny little place I stayed with an old tower, and I got speaking to the local priest, Greek Orthodox priest. And we barely spoke English. He barely spoke English. I didn't speak any Greek. But he kept saying, oh, Maronia, Maronia, the tower of Circe.
Hmm.
In local legend, that's the tower of the enchantress Circe, or Kirke. It's got different pronunciations. And he was convinced that this was one of the stops on the way that Odysseus uh, stopped at. So everywhere you go, legends still prevail that yeah, Odysseus came here and had this adventure or that adventure.
I'm just wondering what Tim's crew thought about signing up for a recreation of a trip with only one survivor the first time.
Yes, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm pleased to say arriving on Ithaca at midnight. That was the most silliest bit of sailing I did. Was probably apart from getting to Venice, that was the proudest moment of my whole trip, where I thought I got from Troy
Hmm.
to Ithaca in, can never remember, 8 weeks. And I did it all, without a motor, without anything really modern, just sails, oars, wind. And that was a very proud moment. Mind you, I did have I had the Corinth Canal to help, which Odysseus wouldn't have had. So I was
Yeah.
cheating a little.
So what was the Corinth Canal like? I mean, that sounds pretty intimidating, I guess, getting through that in a small boat.
Yes, well, look, I'd been told by everybody along the way, said you'll never be allowed through. You won't be allowed through. Um, and when I got there, I went to the harbour master and explained, and he shook his head a bit and said, "No, impossible, impossible." So I went and had a nap on a lawn, just thinking I'll just give him time, give him some time. So many times, the number of times when I was told by officials along the way, absolutely impossible, cannot be done, no. And 20 minutes later, they'll go, well, you could if you, etc. And then, 20 minutes later, say, well, actually, we can help you through and give you a packed lunch as well. They always, always, always just sort of went from bureaucratic pig-headedness to ending up just helping me. And so I got towed through by a larger boat. And it was brilliant. It's incredibly sheer cliffs. I mean, you're in a you're in a space barely wider than a bedroom, with cliffs going up about 100 feet on either side. Uh, yeah, and it it was a feeling of huge relief. That was one of the major land or major obstacles that I felt could be a problem, and then it turned out to be easy.
Do you think you've sort of ruined it for everybody now, or is anyone else going to try that after you?
Sorry?
Do you think that other people are going to try it after you now, or
Oh, I wouldn't recommend it. I had I've got a friend in England who's got a son called Hamish who wanted to go off on a gap year. He's just sort of about 18, and he was saying, yeah, he's thinking with a mate going off and following in your footsteps in a small rubber dinghy. And I just had to say, I don't think so. I mean, I know I've done it, and I don't want to sort of claim to be, well, I'm the only one courageous and bold enough, etc. But I was extremely lucky. There were times when, after the first month, my sister, who's herself a sailor and a risk taker and a brave woman, she wrote to me and said, "Sandy, really, I think you've got to stop. We want you back alive. A dinghy, a mirror dinghy of all things, isn't equipped for what you're going through." And she begged me to stop, and I nearly did because I'd capsized, I'd broken the rudder, I'd got shipwrecked. And then the rudder broke again while I was out to sea. I had about three or four very, very close shaves in over the course of a week early on, and yeah, I would not recommend anybody else doing it unless they've got the luck of the gods, which I seem to have been blessed with. But don't say that too loudly. Hmm.
all right? Any more questions from anybody? Peter, Terry? No? Do you want to take us through some photos then, Sandy?
Well, yeah, okay. So I think you can all see. So there's me off the coast of Greece somewhere, and I can never quite remember who would have taken that photo because it wasn't me. But oh, look, you all know my Jack de Crow was named after my jackdaw. This is a talk I've done for various people, so a lot of the stuff you'll know. But there's the route. You can see starting in Sulina down the coast through the Dardanelles, through the Bosphorus rather, was fantastic. One of the most exciting bits. This incredible narrow strait and coming to the city of Istanbul and so on. Anyway, you can see all the way through the Dardanelles there, and then around the Trident, that huge, great Trident, and finishing in Venice. That's how long it took. 8 countries, 6 seas. I wish it had been 7. I'd love to have said I sailed the 7 seas, but I can't permit myself that license. 11-foot mirror dinghy, no motor. Oh, there's Steve, who was the guy who owns the boat. He was the one. This is the extraordinary story of how it came to be, was that I had wanted to do this trip. I'd sent a guy, a Romanian friend of mine, to go and ask, could you see if the original Jack de Crow is still there? He got back to me one late October night, sent me a message and said, no, it's disappeared. Nobody's ever heard of it. And I went, oh, well, silly idea. Let's forget that daydream. And literally an hour later, this total stranger in England got hold of me and said, I've just bought a bright yellow mirror dinghy and wondering, can I call it Jack de Crow? And I'd had a few whiskies and went, funny you should say that, because literally an hour ago, I gave up on this daydream, which you might be able to help with. How about you call it Jack de Crow, but I come and borrow it, steal it, buy it, rent it, do this journey, and then give it back to you. And and then it'll have a right to be called Jack de Crow. It'll have a real adventure under its keel. And an hour later, I'd sobered up and sent him a message saying, look, please ignore that last email. You call it Jack de Crow, very honoured, with no expectation that you should give your dinghy to a complete stranger. But he wrote back the next morning saying, I think it's a fantastic idea. And not only that, I'll drive you to the Black Sea. So to make it happen. So this is wonderful Steve, who we ended up doing exactly that. Put it on the top of the car and drove 4 days to Romania. The Danube Delta, of course, absolutely beautiful wetlands, massive wildfowl, wildlife, gorgeous. Don't know why I put that when I came across that little picture in a funny little hotel in my first couple of days. And it just absolutely captured the whole romanticism of seafaring and stories. And I couldn't ever work out, am I the old man telling the stories? Or am I this young curly-haired muppet listening, entranced by the sea salt's tales? And I did actually used to look exactly like that young fellow when I was a kid, but perhaps not in the pantaloons. Anyway, that just seemed to capture the whole spirit of the adventure. Bulgaria, cliffs, beautiful little beaches. This is the sort of place where I'd, pull into little harbours. This is somewhere in Bulgaria, I think. Strange Easter tide where the women crawl under the altar, bizarrely. Wildflowers, I'm mad on flowers and birds. I was just going through the most beautiful springtime flowers, stalks. My rudder being fixed, literally half an hour after it was broken, I met 4 workmen on the side of the road who just went, we couldn't fix this, and got the whole thing fixed. This is a classic picture. Me sailing right past the famous Blue Mosque in Istanbul. This was taken by some security guards, border police, water police, and that was one of the most iconic places I went past. And these beautiful, incredible designs. The whole thing's mosaicked in those. A few more pictures of those. Istanbul, just look, all tourist photos. I won't talk about. I did occasionally go off. I had 3 days where I suddenly flew off to a place I'd always wanted to, Çanakkale. No, not Çanakkale. Yes, the place with all the caves, the mountain caves in the middle of Turkey. Astonishing place I'd always wanted to visit. And had a haircut. And this is what a Turkish haircut looks like. You get totally plastered, and then you get hot wax, which is the color of cow manure, dark green, shoved in your ears and in your nostrils, and then ripped out. I've never felt so violated in my life. Anyway, bizarre experiences. Not sure what that's all about. Can't quite remember. Oh, constantly people helping me to repair my boat. Trojan horse, Troy, of course. Odysseus, reference to Odysseus. This is Troy. Um, just loved it. Oh, Anzac, Gallipoli. That was a very moving moment to visit the Anzac Peninsula, the Gallipoli Peninsula, to end up landing. And I mean, this is a view of where they landed. Bizarrely, for the 3 hours sailing to this point, you're going past gentle, beautiful beaches with gentle forest up behind. 3 hours after that, you're going past gentle, beautiful beaches with just forest up behind, gentle sloping forest. This Anzac Cove, worst place on the whole peninsula you could possibly land. That's where they chose to land.
You actually
Bizarre.
landed your mirror at Anzac Cove, did you?
Well, do you know, I did what I'd done 2 days before, staying in the nearby town of Çanakkale. I'd actually uh, got a tour over there, went on a sort of a private tour, visited all that, and then 3 days later I sailed and I got within 3 feet of landing at the cove, because I wanted to do that, and suddenly realized under the water there were just these huge jagged rocks. It looks all like gentle sand, but just meters from the shore, enormous big rounded rocks, and even on a very slight swell, I was in real danger of smashing the boat. So I got these photos, well, these first two earlier, but that one's from the boat as I sailed past. But I was 3 feet away from actually landing. um, I don't know, just that I'd often end up just washing ashore in a little estuary, little churches, beautiful little harbours, um, forest pools, going and swimming, monasteries. Oh, one of the nicest bits was coming round that temple. That's called the Temple of Poseidon on Cape Sunion, and I met up with three incredibly lovely guys, all of whom love mirrors and had mirrors. Greek, yeah, young Greek guy called Nikos, and we sailed in convoy, me and two other mirrors, all the way up to Athens for about 40, 50 Ks, sailing along together, on a splendid, perfect day. That was one of the nicest days of the whole trip, actually.
I realize there's a lot
And
of Nicks in Greece, but I probably know them actually from the mirror
so,
side. So I realize
sorry.
there's a lot of Nicks in Greece, but I probably know them from the mirror community. There's
Yeah.
there's not too many there.
Well, Nikos, I can't remember his surname. I got to know him. That was one of the good things about Facebook. He got onto Facebook and said, "Oh, you're coming to Athens. You must come, and we'll sail." And one of the lovely things about sailing along beside two other mirrors was, even though I've said I'm not a very good sailor, I'm not interested in getting the most out of the wind, etc. I discovered I'd got quite good at it, because I was sailing along with these people who do take their racing very seriously, and I was realizing I could keep pace with them, and I could even draw ahead of them at times by doing certain things with the sails, and so on and so on. So it was actually it was actually really, really lovely to be sailing along in comparable boats. Mine much heavier because it's full of luggage, but we were going sort of neck and neck, and occasionally I'd draw ahead and then they'd draw ahead, and that was a really lovely bit of the whole journey. And there we are, our three mirrors, with three sterns there and one extra stern there in the foreground of a woman who absolutely refused to move as we were carrying our little dinghies over the top of her, as you will. The glories of Greece, Parthenon, etc., etc. On this lovely coincidence, here's my flag, Jack de Crow, but in a little Greek temple up on a remote island, I found a crow with a ring in its beak, which I just thought was a lovely coincidence. Um, Look, too many. I don't want to bore you, but wonderful statue of Don Quixote or Cervantes, which became really important to me. Delphi, the ancient ruins of Delphi, which were probably the most important archaeological site in the ancient world, or the most important sacred site in the ancient world. There I am on Ithaca. That's a statue of Odysseus, and this is me in the ruins of the palace of Odysseus. I got robbed in Albania, and helped by two policemen. There was an ostrich involved, all peculiar. Not Dubrovnik, sorry, Montenegro, fantastic. This is the sort of places I was going to. Dubrovnik, absolutely brilliant. And then this incredible coast. This is Dubrovnik down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And this bit was the most enjoyable bit because it was like going back to Jindabyne and sailing between the little islands and working out, oh, do you go this way or that way? And navigating this bit was a sailor's dream. I recommend you all get in your mirror dinghies, take them to Croatia and do that coast. Just odd, beautiful places, waterfalls. That was the prow of my dinghy, set up for sailing, my pith helmet on the front, everything neatly stacked away. And this is the entrance to the harbour at Venice. And getting there, oh my goodness, euphoria. And sailing into the Piazza San Marco, me stepping ashore and finishing in Venice. And then I got the boat all the way back to Steve's Garden in Oxfordshire. And you can see how terribly battered it had become. It even had barnacles growing on it, which I think is probably a bit rare for a dinghy, for a mirror dinghy. Marine barnacles. Poor little battered
At
old
least you
thing.
returned it this time.
Sorry?
At least you returned it this time from the.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, Steve. Anyway, I've chatted on too much and you've been very, very patient listening.
Right. So last call for any questions then. So I guess well, it's two questions really to wrap up. So first of all, the book. So we're all expecting a new book.
Yes.
Any clues?
Yeah, so look, I've sent it off to the publishers. It's going to be out in August. It's called Realms of Gold. That was there's one bit where I was sailing along on that late afternoon, and there's this wonderful poem by Keats which starts, "Much have I travelled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been." I thought, oh, that just captures this voyage so perfectly. And by a nice coincidence, he wrote the poem when he first read the Odyssey. So he read Keats back in the 1750s, read the Odyssey, was so impressed by the actual story that he then wrote this poem extolling its virtues. So it Realms of Gold to me just has a good ring to it, with a subtitle, The Remarkable Return of Jack de Crow. And yes, it'll be out in August. I've still got to do all the illustrations and maps, but apart from that, it'll be ready to go.
Excellent.
And last question.
Last question. So what's next? Is it going to be a third voyage, or do you have anything else any other adventures
No.
planned?
I don't. I'm not saying there won't be one, but at all times in my life, there's always been this sort of little daydream ticking away, bubbling away. Like this one has been bubbling away years, since 2009. and I've been fairly certain that it's been like, growing embryonically. At the moment, I don't have any. I'm really, really enjoying being home, garden. I'm in a lovely relationship with a new partner. I'm enjoying my teaching. I'm going to retire very soon and take up full-time painting and composing, and that's going to keep me very happy for a while. So probably no more voyages yet planted, but who knows?
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sandy, for joining us, and best of luck with the book. And I'm sure we'll look forward to seeing that when it comes out.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been lovely to chat to you all. And sorry if I've rabbited on a bit and I haven't given much chance of two-way conversation.
Been great, Sandy. It's really, really good.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
enjoyed it.
Thank-
Enjoyed
Thanks a
following
lot,
you.
Hey
Sandy.
guys, I'm going. Cheers. All right. Bye. I'll go. See you. Thanks again for setting it up.